Welcome back to the Social Abuse Podcast, Community, Care, and Contracts. I am your host, Vanessa A. Calloway. Welcome to episode 5. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thank you so much for tuning back in. I am super excited about this episode. It gives us a moment to reflect back over the previous episodes. I know you all were expecting Council Member Soheila Bana. However, we all know life happens. And being a public servant, definitely things happen. And so for the time that we had scheduled, City Council called an emergency council meeting. So she will be with us episode 6. So nonetheless, I'm solo today, but we're going to just talk, okay? We're going to talk about episode 4. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into social abuse, the housing first model. We're going to revisit some of the things that Dr. Brown shared with us in last episode. If you missed episode 4, it was definitely a treat. Go take a listen. If you're not following or subscribed, please make for sure that you're subscribing to your favorite podcast platform. You can find us everywhere. Also, we have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So make for sure that you're following us for tidbits there. And so social abuse, right? After episode 4, I sat with my thoughts for a moment. Because there were some things that Dr. Brown shared, wasn't really anticipating, honestly. And I think we need to rehash some things, so to speak, go a little bit deeper. And we're going to sit with some stuff. We're going to pull out some things that didn't get fully unpacked in episode 4. And like I said, we're going to talk about housing first a little bit, what it is, what it isn't, and what's it really doing in our inner city community. So not just Richmond, right? And so let me share this. I had a friend, because, I'm building the podcast, trying to build the subscribers and things of that nature. And so I sent the podcast to a friend that isn't local. And his response was, I don't live in Richmond. What I'm supposed to do with this, right? And I'm like, follow it, listen to it because you're my friend. I said, but also it's not just for those in Richmond or those in California, because if you've listened to previous episodes, this is happening across our country. Social abuse. We talked about what it looked like slightly in the Seattle, Bellevue area, Washington State. And yes, we've kind of been focused in on Richmond. 1, because I'm a native. 2, we brought in some of our local candidates that were running in the primaries. We brought in one of our current sitting council members, and we're going to be talking with another, because I really want you all to come to your own conclusion, but to also marry all the different aspects, right? So we briefly talked about our unhoused brothers and sisters in episodes 1 and 2, and real surfacey what social abuse looked like for them. Also in episode 2 and 3, we touched a little bit on what social abuse looked like for the service provider. Episode 4, we went in deep, right? You all reached out to me. That was the only episode that I received as much feedback, I should say, outside of course, the launching episode. But it hit home for some of you. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper, right? And so I want you to grab your coffee, your tea, your water, get comfortable, and let's talk. Let's chat. And as these episodes are coming, I want to hear from you. I want you to provide your comments in the on the platform that you're watching from. Um, I'm on YouTube as well, so you can chime in those comments. I do respond. If it's something you don't want on public display, you can always text me 510-827-9859 with your questions, with your thoughts, things of that nature, because this is a community podcast. And what I mean by that, I don't want to just discuss and talk with people that agree with me, that's on the same page with me. I want you to hear all perspectives and come with your own conclusion. I want you to understand what's taking place in real time. I want you to be able to put language with what you're seeing and be able to ask the right questions in the right context. Okay. And so, again, episode 4. Episode 4. I sat in my thoughts for a while. And I mean, just really thinking, replaying the conversations that Dr. Jamelia Brown shared with us. As I mentioned in that podcast episode, she's a mother. She's a doctor. She services our mental health population. She's not just a mom, she's a mom of 4. She's a Richmond native and she sits on the Richmond City Council. And when she was here, she gave everything that she had. I don't think either of us knew how much was going to come out in that episode. She said something at the very top of the episode that I keep going back to. I asked her to describe Richmond in her words, not what the headlines say, not what her constituents say, but real Richmond from her perspective. And without missing a beat, she said, Richmond, California, a city of pain and poverty. Let that sit in. So, not pride and purpose, which is our official tagline for Richmond, but pain and poverty. I want you to sit with that for a minute. When you think of your community, where you live, and your representative says pain and poverty. And here's the thing. I don't want you all to hear what I'm not saying, and I don't want you to pick up what I'm not putting down. Because I don't believe that statement from Dr. Brown came from a place of bitterness. You know, when you love someone, you want the best for them, right? And sometimes it comes with hard conversations. It comes with a sternness sometimes that the one on the receiving end may not understand until they're on the other side of whatever that hard is, right? And so her saying that wasn't her giving up. This is a woman that loves the city of Richmond deeply, and so deeply that she refuses to put a pretty bow on what it actually costs those of us that live here, right? That kind of honesty, that's love. It's hard love. It's real love. Real love. Hey, go Mary, right? And so I make light of it, but sometimes love isn't sweet, fluffy, the cotton candy and all the bubbly feelings, the butterfly feelings in our stomach. Sometimes love is uncomfortable. And if we're going to grow and if we're going to do better, love has to become uncomfortable, because sometimes it's in the uncomfort that change happens, the discomfort rather, right? And so then she took us through her story of growing up in the Barrett's apartments. in central Richmond, looking outside of her project window, listening to Nas, right? Trying to convince herself that there is more outside than the bloodshed. Take a pause and think about that for a minute, because despite the walk of life those of you that are listening have walked, I'm sure at some point in your journey, you've asked yourself that question. It has to be more to life than this. Now, I want you to take it a step further. Consider our brothers and sisters that are part of the population of our homeless community, right? That wake up on that sidewalk, in that shelter, that's couch surfing, that have possibly said yes to the services that are being provided or offered, but what was said that was going to be offered may not be what is actually being offered. And their thought is, I thought it was going to be different. I know that there's more to life than this. Let that sink in. Let it sink in. There has to be more outside than the bloodshed, is what she shared. And so she also shared that before she ran for Richmond, she ran from Richmond, right? She talked about how she would drive past Nevin Park and the Bay Area Rescue Mission to go to Marin County, right? High paying job. And she was pretending that she didn't see the true Richmond, the homelessness, the empty buildings, all the things, right? She mentioned at one point in the episode of survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse, and she said that she still carry it. That right there, this is why the podcast still exists, because we're carrying things that we don't have to. We're carrying things that we don't even have a name to yet, right? Things that we've been told, push through, pray through, smile through. You know, the many masks that we're taught and trained to put on, whether directly or indirectly. Just show up, be professional, right? And we do it. We show up anyway. But here's the thing. No one asked the nonprofit workers, not just EDs, but the workers. No one asked our public servants, at what cost do you keep showing up? Because there's a cost. And Jamelia, she told us personally what it has cost her. She told us about the behavior of council members when she first was sworn in. She told us about the behavior of the vice mayor who wouldn't even speak to her. She shared about council member Claudia Jimenez that asked her in their very first one-on-one to use her identity as a Black woman to take down two other Black women. One being city manager Shasha Curl, and the other Tamara Walker. And when she said no, Claudia behavior showed it. The distance, the bullying, those sort of things, right? You hear of things like that, the manipulation and games being played. You hear about that in high school and just, whatnot. But behind those curtains of city council, it's happening. It's happening. So what you heard in episode 4, it wasn't politics. We talked about politics. We talked about some policy. But what you heard was a human being, Dr. Jamelia, Councilmember Brown, telling you who showed up for her and who didn't. She is a woman who has been isolated, undermined, and hazed inside the very institution she was elected to serve in. And she's still there. She's still showing up. She's still fighting for the residents of Richmond, California. And so I don't know if Dr. Brown is listening to this episode, but Dr. Brown, if you are, I want you to know that it took courage for you to share what you shared in episode 4. You didn't have to say those things. You held them in for a long time. I heard you say that because you didn't want it to look political. You didn't want it to seem like you were taking jabs. But the truth is, the truth has weight to it. And when you finally put it down, even just for an hour, I hope you felt some relief. I hope you felt seen because you were, because you are. And to our listeners who reached out afterwards, every single one of you who said the episode hit different, who said you finally had a name for something you'd been feeling, this is why we're here. This is why. And so I want you to make for sure that you're not keeping this podcast to yourself. Make for sure that you're sharing it with others so they too can put a name to what they may be feeling. So let's talk about housing first, because it came up a little bit in episode 3, more so in episode 4. And so the official Housing First model, it started on the East Coast out of New York through a nonprofit called Pathways of Housing. The core idea is this: stable, permanent housing is not a reward you earn after you get sober or find a job. It's a human right that comes first. Get people housed first, then address everything else. Now listen, I understand the heart behind that. I do. And again, please don't hear what I'm not saying. Okay? Because when someone is sleeping outside in January, February, March, concrete is cold at 2 a.m. in the morning, regardless of the month. Okay? When that person that's sleeping outside don't know what their tomorrow look like, when every single ounce of their energy is going toward survival, asking them to get clean first, to get employed first, find some stability first before you get a roof, that can feel cruel. And sometimes it is. But here is where I have to be honest with you about what I saw from the inside. So you've heard me mention the contract that I've had with the city of Richmond in previous episodes, and ERF1, which is Encampment Resolution 1, and ERF2, Encampment Resolution 2. Both of those were 2 separate grants provided by the state of California with under the idea of housing first, right? And so with ERF1, there was one large encampment that had over 100 unhoused brothers and sisters residing on site in campers and tents and things of that nature. ERF2, we were going to different encampments. And so you live, you learn, you find some things out, right? And so I definitely found some things out. So in ERF1, we were getting them into housing. I developed a network called the Housing Network. And that housing network consisted of landlords, housing providers, and we would meet once a month and talk about different housing issues and how we could best serve those we would be placing in those apartments or in those SROs. SROs are single room occupancy. And so because my thing was, I didn't just want to serve our unhoused, but I wanted a partnership with the landlords, right? Because we need them, they need us. And as time went on and we moved on to we moved on to ERF2, It looked a little bit different because they didn't go from encampment to housing, so to speak. They went from encampment to what we call navigation center, which was a hotel. And so I'm going to pause here for a moment. Little commercial break, so to speak. If you are an organization that is looking for some consulting, W2L Consulting can help you with your framework, with contracts and things of that nature, whether it's a city contract or a contract with another nonprofit. You can email us at w2lconsulting@gmail.com. So I won't go into the details of everything because I am a consultant. But in ERF2, I felt some kind of way because, again, I had saw some things with ERF1. I had learned some things, so I revamped some things, right? And I remember telling the city at the beginning of ERF1, I'm not that girl that's just going to check a box. So if that's who you're looking for, I'm not her. These are people with lives, with stories. And my hope is that it's sustainable, not just checking a box and putting them somewhere, right? And so, so the thoughts, the ideas, and the frameworks that I had put together, and some of it the city is still using because I was under contract and they didn't give me anything to be successful with. I had to create everything from documents to frameworks myself, but because I was under contract, they got to keep it, right? But because the model of Housing First said no conditions, that meant we couldn't drug test. That meant we couldn't force certain things, right? And for me, and again, earlier we talked about tough love, right? There are some things that you as an individual have to be held accountable for with support. Some people say, I'm not hand holding, and this was a service provider during that contract time. I'm not hand holding no grown man hand. He grown. Yeah, but you have a job and your job is to help support him. We have to hold his hand. We hear of it takes a village to raise a child. Well, guess what? It takes a village to support and uplift one another when we've fallen or when we've spiraled out. And so I'm not saying that we take away their rights, but some of our unhoused brothers and sisters are dealing with mental illness. They're dealing with addiction, right? Not all of them, but some of them are. And so the thought is, let's do our due diligence and find the a living relative, right? And we create a plan for them to be successful, because see, state money, grant money, it eventually runs out. Put a pin there, and we're going to come back to that. And so the thought is, after asking different questions, not what is Housing First, but who benefits from Housing First staying the way that it is. Because here's the thing, Richmond and cities like Richmond receive significant amount of money, state money, federal money, grant money for the unhoused population, right? So I mentioned before, our 3 shelters have been at 100% capacity for about almost 3 years now, which means they're over capacity, right? But yet the problem isn't shrinking. And yet the same organizations keep getting funded. And yet the solutions stay out of reach. And so in episode 4, you heard the conversation. If you solve the problem, the funding stops. So do cities, particularly inner cities, do they really want to solve the problem? Because if the problem is solved, there's no more grants to apply for. Let that sink in. Social abuse on a whole nother level. And the suburbs have this problem too. I may say inner city, but the suburbs is there too, right? And so, again, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying everyone in this space has bad intentions. I know people who genuinely love the work, love those impacted by homelessness. But what I am saying is that the system is designed in a way to make it very comfortable to keep things the way they are. Y'all remember the old saying, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, that determines who's looking at it. It's not broke in governmental or institutional eyes because they're constantly, it's a merry-go-round. I remember a firefighter and a police officer when I was working at the encampment said, Vanessa, this is a merry-go-round. You're not going to be able to fix this, right? And so it's a merry-go-round because we put them somewhere temporary. We don't provide them the necessary support that they need, so they end back up on the street, right? Because that's what happens. And that's what happens with housing first. Because if you can't put in a framework type of way that these things are needed, these things being inpatient or outpatient rehab, right? Mental health support. And so when you are the small organization with a big heart and you get brought to the table, and I've been that person, you don't always see it coming, right? You trust the process. You believe the paperwork. You think the goal is what they say the goal is. But is it really? Right? I've seen money be mishandled. Social abuse. And then when questions are asked, it's kind of, we're not talking about that right now, right? And so I remember the time where it was coming to an end and I knew that it was time for me to walk away. Just for many factors, many factors. And I struggled with it because these are individuals that I have called brother and sister for the last 2 years, right? These are people that I've grown to love and to care for. This is a work that I know that I'm called to do, but at what cost, right? And so I'll never forget sitting. I was at the navigation center, and during this time, I was working 7 days a week. And so I took a lunch break to go do my therapy session in my car. And I'm struggling. And my therapist says, shout out to Simone from Attuned Counseling. My therapist says, you do realize you've been in a domestic abuse relationship with the city of Richmond for the past 2 years, right? And it was like a gut punch. And she went on to say the manipulation, the false accolades. And she started naming things and the tears just began to roll. And just thinking about it, it's a soft spot because I never equated it in that sense. And I come from a home where there was domestic violence, right? And so I was like, it's a cycle, but just in a different way, right? And so I was taken aback because I didn't expect to go here today, right? I didn't. And so I'm trying to grab my footing back. So I thought about it and there was truth in it. So that's really where the podcast birthed from, right? Because I didn't have the words to articulate what I was experiencing. So then let's fast forward to last episode when Dr. Brown talked about Motel 6 project, right? So we have 48 units and $28 million. You heard me. 48 units. So 48 people will be able to be in a unit. And I don't even believe, from what I remember from the plan, it's a full 48 because they're going to have an on-site person if it hasn't changed, right? So let's say 47 people, right? $28 million. And this is a motel that's right across from City Hall. And she said from the jump, unless we require sober living, because mind you, we're talking about housing first, this is going to be New Jack City. Y'all know New Jack City, Pookie. What? Before I make change. Y'all remember the movie, right? Y'all remember the projects and the police going through and all the, she said it's going to be new because that's what it was before, right? And so, and there's also a tiny home village being built nearby. I won't say much on that because I'm still digging into it a little bit to understand it a little bit more. And I'll talk about that more at a later date. Because I got some feelings about it. And I want to be fair though. So I want to actually see what happens because I'm watching. And those of you that are listening, I hope that you're watching where you are. Watching so that you can ask the right questions in the right context, right? So what I will say, and I want you to lean in, a roof is not recovery. A building is not a community. And $28 million should come with $28 million of accountability. Y'all remember that Luther song, a house is not a home and a chair is just a chair if ain't nobody sitting here. Y'all know, right? So a roof, just because we're placing them and giving them a roof, that's not recovery. Putting them in an apartment complex, that's not community. Isolation can happen in there. And $28 million should come with $28 million of accountability. Are we quiet? Are we asking questions? Who's going to hold who accountable? And when they're not doing what they said they're going to, let's talk about it. That's why we're here, right? And so the question is never, did we house people? The question is, are those people more whole than they were before? Are they safer? Are they more connected? Do they have access to mental health, to treatment, to employment pathways, to community? And let's dig a little bit deeper. Not do they just have access? Are they utilizing it? Because I've seen access on paper. Oh yeah, we got people that come, they offer. Are they seen? Are they helping? Social abuse. Right? We're putting it on paper. We're saying, oh yeah, we're doing this. But are we just doing it so that when the next grant drops, our application looks good? Because we got the documentation, but is it truthful? We're talking about social abuse, the behind the scenes, the people, because there are some people, I believe, in positions that I won't name them, that do certain things with paperwork because for the fear of losing their jobs, right? But we'll talk about that later. So I want to be clear about something. I'm not anti-housing first. I'm anti-pretending. I am anti-funding over people. What do you mean by that, Vanessa? When the dollar means more than the person, I have a problem with that. Now, believe me, I understand we need the dollar in order to properly help the person. But if we're only giving them the scraps just so they could still only get by to find themselves back in that position, we're not helping them. And it's funding. You want the money, but you don't want really to do the work to help the people to keep the money, to keep the money in the sense of I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing so I can help them. Something just happened this week alone. Way to Love, which is a nonprofit organization that I founded in 2021, we were awarded on paper a grant. On paper. We never received the money. This week, I received a message saying, hey, did you all ever receive X, Y, and Z from the city? I said, no, we didn't. And there are certain things at certain seasons of my life, it was like, I ain't got the energy to fight for that, right? Don't have the capacity. So again, I'm not telling you something that I heard. I'm telling you something that I've lived. I couldn't tell you today where that money went. I worked with an excellent grant writer, right? And so it happens. Where's the money? Social abuse. I'm anti bringing someone to the table as a face when you don't actually want them asking any questions, when you don't want their input. And if any of this that I've mentioned so far in this podcast has made you uncomfortable, good. Sit in it. Because the discomfort might be the beginning of real change. You know, when we get comfortable, because if you're in your own home, your own apartment, you're not on the streets, right? You can kind of be like Dr. Jamelia. You can pretend that it's not there. But if you really want change in your community, you have to stop pretending. You have to stop putting a blind eye. You have to acknowledge what it is. You can't heal. You can't fix anything until there's acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is important. And then past the acknowledgement, let's do the work. Let's put our differences aside and let's do the work. Right. And so social abuse, because when I named this podcast, I really wasn't sure that people would get it, right? Like, are they gonna get it? It's not a clinical term. You're not gonna find it in the DSM. If you Google it, you might find a couple of academic papers about it, but that's about it, right? But when I said it, when Jamelia heard it, something clicked, and that's what I want for you. She said, I've never heard it spoken about in this capacity. And I realized that's exactly why we have to name it, right? Because if you don't name a thing, you don't know how to resolve a thing. You just keep going day by day and it's like, oh, it's screwed up. It's just going to be screwed up. I don't know what it is. Something ain't right, but I don't know what it is. But when you can acknowledge what's not right, then you can start putting the pieces together. Right? So social abuse is what happens when the systems, institutions, communities that are supposed to hold you harm you instead. Sometimes loudly. More often, it is the isolation that comes when you try to do right in a space built to do wrong. It is the manipulation dressed up as help. It is the barrier that looks like policy. It is the silence in a room full of people when you walk in and no one acknowledges that you exist, right? Social abuse. Social abuse. But it's not always political. It lives in nonprofits. It lives in churches. It lives in community organizations that call themselves family until you start asking too many questions. It lives in the grant cycle where the same people keep getting funding, not because they're doing the best work, but because they have the best relationship with the people cutting the checks, right? It lives in the encampment where someone who came to help shows up with good intentions and slowly over time realized that they were brought in as a shield, as a face, as plausible deniability. Listen here. It lives in the burnout of service providers who pour everything she or he has in his or her community. And one day realizes They've been pouring into a vessel that has a hole in the bottom. Social abuse. How does that sit with you? So here's what I've learned about social abuse. It is most dangerous when it comes wearing love. That's right. You know, wolf in sheep clothing. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And I'll get to that in a moment. And so showing up, saying, I love you, we're family. The system says we're here to help. The institution says we care about community. But when harm comes, and it comes, you don't trust yourself, right? And so you begin to doubt. You begin to say, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I'm reading more into it. No, keep reading. Keep reading. But that's when um, the importance of having a healthy community, right? To break down and to go a little bit deeper, to have different perspectives, right? And then sometimes some of you may say, maybe I should just be grateful for a seat at the table. Absolutely not. What's the point of having a seat at the table if you don't have a voice? And so sometimes we have to leave the table and go make our own table and bring other community members with like-minded to still do the work. And sometimes for those of us that are empaths, those of us that know we have a call on our life, those of us that know we can't just sit by and not say anything, is hard because the doubt, the self-questioning, that is abuse working exactly the way that it was designed to. You don't have to sit there and take the abuse. Mm-mm. You don't have to. You're not. Let me put it to you this way. Everything that you have, everything that you desire to give to your community and to those that you're called to is usable, is worthy. There's value to it. So if you're somewhere that the value isn't being acknowledged, then you shift, you pivot, right? So last episode, Dr. Brown talked about, she says, who can you even go to talk to? Because if you go to tell someone on the council what's happening to you, you might as well go tell the person who's doing it, because they will go right back. And here's what I want you all to know. That's not paranoia. That's a woman who has learned through lived experience how power protects itself. And so we too have to protect ourselves, right? And so people carry it. They smile. They show up in their good outfit. They trim, they line, right? The different masks. They keep showing up. She says, you go down to the chamber and you sit across from people who have tried to make you invisible, and you do the work anyway because the residents need you, because the people who voted for you need you, because you made a promise to a community that has already been let down too many times. And you go home and fall apart in private, and then you get up and do it again. That, my friends, is social abuse. And you were never created to carry such a weight by yourself. Never. And that's it, and hit home for me because I remember when I couldn't articulate what I was feeling. I remember the hurt, the pain, the manipulation, the feeling of helplessness, right? How is the person that's serving the people who have lost hope and who are helpless, feeling helpless and hopeless, right? And so there is a part of me, because of my culture, because of my environment, that says you push through, you keep going. So when I was pulling away, I was toiling with it. It was like a push and pull, but I knew it would have been at the detriment of me. And that didn't need to be the case. And so if you're listening and you're recognizing what I'm describing, the fact that you're still standing is not nothing. The fact that you keep showing up, even when the institution tries to wear you down, that's not weakness. That is that extra sauce, extraordinary. Listen, but I also need you to hear this. You are not required to absorb the abuse in silence in order to be of service to your community. You are allowed to name it. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to walk away from tables that were never built for you. Go build your own. Go build your own with like-minded people. Because when you walk away, it's okay, right? You choosing yourself is not abandoning your community. And I wrestled with that. It's like, how can I say I'm leaving, but I've called them my brothers and sisters? And I know that I have the heart. How, right? Sometimes it's the most radical self-care you can offer. Because here's the thing. When you take care of you the way that God has intended us to take care of ourselves, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you're not loving yourself properly, you can't love your neighbor properly, right? And so sometimes walking away, and sometimes it's the pivot. And so don't be so married to the how of the call. Trust God through the call, right? And so I'm called to the unhoused and to the youth. But how God decides to navigate that, I have to be open to it. So I may not have a contract with the city of Richmond, but now I have a podcast. Now I'm giving a name to things that people didn't necessarily have a name for. Now I'm talking about it, because here's the other thing. You can't heal what you won't name. We said it earlier. You can't fix what you don't have a name to, because you don't know what can fix it, right? Social abuse, social abuse. And so that is episode 5. I'm really excited about the next 2 episodes. Episode 6, as you know, we have Council Member Soheila Bana that will be joining us. And then episode 7, we have someone with lived experience of being unhoused. So 3 generations, 1, 2, 3, 3 generations of homelessness. And I had the privilege of loving on this family through the highs, through the lows. And she has agreed to come and share her story with you all. And I'm really, really excited about that because you all need to hear it from them, not just from me, right? And so thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you more than you ever know. Please make for sure that you have subscribed to the podcast platform of your choosing. Also, I'm on YouTube. If you are a visual person, make for sure you're asking questions in the comment section. If you feel uncomfortable putting your questions out there, like I said earlier, you can text it to me, 510-827-9859. If you're an organization that's looking for consulting in nonprofit and contracts in building morale for your teams, reach out to me at lconsulting@gmail.com. Again, like, subscribe on all the different platforms. Whew, it's been a day, y'all. The podcast started because I needed a name for something I had been living but couldn't fully articulate, right? Social abuse. The way systems harms us while telling us they're helping. The way institutions isolate us while calling it inclusion. The way communities exploit the people who love them most. And what I'm finding in every conversation, in every episode, in every message y'all send me, is that it's everywhere. It's in our city hall, it's in our nonprofits, it's in our shelters, it's in our schools and our churches, it's in our neighborhood associations. It's woven into the fabric of how cities across America operates. And it has been for a very long time. But here's what gives me life. The people who are still here anyway, the Jamelias, the Soheilas, the service providers who keep showing up even after city have showed them who they really were. The residents who go to city council meetings even when they feel like they're not being heard. The young people who are watching all of this and deciding, I am going to do something about it. That is Richmond, California, too. That is the city of pain and poverty, and I'll add potential. And so I know that you all have heard me mention Richmond in California, but each time I mention Richmond or California, I just encourage you, add your city, add your state, because I'm sure it's happening right under your nose and you may not even be able to identify it, right? I'm not going to stop talking about it until the pain has a name, the poverty has an address, and the people who have been abused by the system have a seat at the table that is actually built for them. You've been listening to the Social Abuse Podcast, Community, Care, and Contracts. I'm your host, Vanessa A. Calloway. Ask the right questions, get involved in your community, and remember, the light has to be shed in order for it to be diminished. Episode 6 is coming. Have a great one. Remember, like and subscribe.